He looked like a man who had just won the first round. No cuffs, no fear, just that same controlled arrogance, sharpened now by the presence of money and legal insulation. His lawyer leaned down, murmured something into his ear. Hartman's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. He glanced at Abby, then back at me, as if measuring how much damage he could still do from across a room. I didn't move. That unsettled him more than shouting ever could have. An officer approached me with a clipboard. "Ma'am, for now he's being released pending verification of his credentials." He claims he was acting under a lawful contract. "From who?" I asked. The officer hesitated. That pause told me everything. "That information isn't available to you at this time." Of course it wasn't. Hartman walked past us slowly, deliberately close. His cologne expensive, synthetic, predator cut through the stale air. "This isn't over," he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. "People like you always crack eventually. You don't belong in soft places like malls or motherhood." Abby flinched. That was his mistake. I stood. The room shifted. Not physically, psychologically. The way it does when prey forgets who it's dealing with. I leaned down so Abby could hear me clearly, calmly. "Sweetheart, go sit by the officer with the blue pen." She hesitated for half a second, then obeyed. Then I faced Hartman. "You should listen very carefully," I said, my voice level, almost gentle, "because this is the only warning you're going to get." The lawyer stepped forward. "My client has been advised not to." "I'm not threatening him," I cut in. "I'm informing him." I locked eyes with Hartman. "You used a public restroom, a false pretext, and direct verbal contact to identify and isolate a minor. You were recorded. Your face, your voice, your language. You lied about your authority, and you underestimated how many systems I know how to navigate." His smile faltered just slightly. "I don't need to touch you," I continued. "I don't need to raise my voice. I will dismantle your credibility piece by piece. Your licenses, your contracts, your financial trail, and whoever hired you. They just inherited my full attention." The lawyer's expression hardened. He recognized that tone. "Professionals always do." Hartman recovered quickly. "You think your little video scares me?" "No," I said. "But the people who quietly stopped returning your calls starting tomorrow will." Silence. The desk sergeant cleared his throat. "Ma'am, that's enough." I nodded. I was done. Hartman walked out of the precinct 10 minutes later, but he never looked back. He didn't need to. 3 days later, my phone rang at 0200, unknown number. I answered on the first ring. Staff Sergeant Barnes. A male voice said, "This is Internal Affairs. We need to ask you some questions about a private investigator named Brian Hartman." I closed my eyes. The hunt had begun. By the end of the week, his legal assignment unraveled. The client didn't exist. The contract was forged. His PI license had expired 6 months earlier. The mall footage combined with my recording triggered a broader review. Turns out Hartman didn't just stalk my daughter. He specialized in intimidation, custody leverage, quiet coercion for people who could afford deniability, and he had finally picked the wrong mother. Abby sleeps with the light on now. I let her. Strength isn't pretending fear doesn't exist, it's teaching your child they're safe even when it does. As for me, I went back to base, back to routine. Back to a world where threats don't announce themselves with silk ties and smiles. Hartman was arrested again 2 weeks later. This time, there were no cameras, no speeches, no grandstanding, just paperwork, charges, consequences. He never spoke to me again, and that's fine. Because some battles aren't won by being louder. They're won by standing your ground, knowing exactly who you are, and absolutely refusing to let anyone rewrite that for you or your child. He walked away like a man who'd already won, slow, confident, certain. As he passed our bench, he leaned in just enough for his presence to linger. Expensive cologne mint, sharp metal. Something cold beneath it, the kind of scent meant to intimidate. My client is very concerned about her granddaughter's safety, Hartman murmured, his voice slick, almost affectionate. She believes the military is a coarse environment for a young lady, thinks you're staining the girl with gunpowder. He didn't wait for my reply, just smiled, satisfied, and disappeared into the Ohio night. My nails dug into my palms until skin broke. There was only one person in my life who talked like that, one woman who weaponized words like coarse to describe my existence, Margaret Louise Miller. My mother-in-law, a woman protected by old money and polished smiles, watching the world struggle through a telescope of judgment. My phone vibrated. Mike, my late husband's younger brother. Maisie, God, I just heard. Is Abby okay? His voice rushed through the line, breathless, frantic. To frantic, I'm getting in the car right now. I'll come get you. Just stay there. Everything in me froze. I hadn't called Mike. The police hadn't released anything. We'd been here less than 45 minutes, so how did he know? How did you hear? I asked. Flat. Cold, like reading a name off a headstone. Facebook, he stammered. Someone posted a woman in uniform. I just had a feeling. His bravado collapsed into a weak, pathetic stutter. I closed my eyes and the police station vanished. I was back at Thanksgiving. White linen, fine china, silver polished by people Margaret never learned the names of. I'd arrived straight from base, still in uniform. Margaret hadn't looked at me once during the prayer, when the turkey was carved. She finally spoke. God created women to keep. The fire in the kitchen. Maisie, she said, eyes fixed on my calloused hands, not to carry rifles in the mud. David's death, that was the price of your pride. You chose a career over your husband. You chose to be a soldier instead of a wife. She paused, surgical. And now he's buried in Arlington while you play hero. Mike sat beside me, staring into his pumpkin soup, silent, shrinking. He didn't defend me, didn't look at his mother. He just kept eating. That night, I understood something simple and brutal. Moral courage is rare, and Mike was its absence made flesh. Mommy, Abby's voice pulled me back. She looked up at me, clutching her old teddy bear, searching my face for reassurance for a lie that said everything was fine. What is it, sweetie? I whispered, brushing her hair back. That mean man, she said softly. The one in the bathroom. He smelled like Uncle Mike's car, like mint, and those smelly cigarettes. The world tilted. Mint and tobacco, the Miller men's signature. But only one of them still smoked those imported cigarettes. A shard of truth cut through everything. Hartman hadn't followed us. He'd been waiting. In Mike's car, my brother-in-law hadn't just heard about the incident. He'd helped plan it. I looked down at my phone, glowing with missed calls. The glass wall around that family, the one I'd trusted, began to crack. They weren't coming to save us. They were coming to finish it. Mike burst into the precinct minutes later, dripping sweat, breathing loud enough to echo, a man performing heroism like a bad audition. Thank God you're safe, he cried, lunging forward. I stepped between him and my daughter. Training took over. I saw everything. Dilated pupils, fear, not love. Trembling hands, eyes that refused to meet mine. How did you get here so fast? I asked. Gut feeling, he said, forcing a smile, sixth sense. Or a message from Hartman saying the plan had gone wrong. I said nothing. Silence does things to guilty men. I let him drive us home. The car ride was suffocating. He rambled about football, about how dangerous the world was getting. I watched, listened, logged every detail. When we pulled into my driveway, he hopped out, and a slip of yellow paper fell from his coat. I grabbed it, a wire transfer receipt. Recipient, Hartman Investigative Services. Amount, $5,000. Memo, Project Polaris. Initial retainer. My world didn't crumble. It burned $5,000. That was what my daughter's safety was worth to him. I pocketed the paper. Everything okay? Mike asked. Fine, I said. Just tired. Inside the house, betrayal grew. Legs, I remembered the spare key, the smile, the trust I'd given. I left Abby colouring and swept the house like a soldier clearing a room. On the mantel sat our wedding photo, David in dress blues, me in white, both of us believing the world was ours. Behind the frame taped carefully in place, a listening device blinked red. Every 5 seconds, the hunt wasn't over, it had just changed direction. Seconds, a tiny red blink in the dark, a digital eye watching my grief, recording whispered bedtime conversations. Capturing every moment my daughter and I believed we were alone and feeding it all straight back. To Margaret Miller, Mike hadn't been watering my plants, he'd been harvesting my life. He'd turned our home, the one place Abby felt safe, into a glass cage, a stage for his mother's twisted amusement. The violation cut deeper than the stalking at the mall. This was intimate, surgical, a desecration of David's memory, a rape of privacy so complete it made my skin crawl. Then Mike walked in, smiling. He carried a steaming box of pepperoni pizza from the parlor down the street. Like nothing in the world was wrong. I got the thin crust Abby likes, he said lightly. Thought we could have a normal night. Normal. I stood in the center of the room. In my left hand, the $5,000 wire receipt. In my right, the listening device still blinking, still alive. I didn't look at him like a sister-in-law. I looked at him the way a commander looks at a traitor caught in the wire. A normal night. Mike, my voice was barely a whisper, yet it owned the room. I lifted the bug, its red eye reflecting back at him from my stare. Is this what your mother calls normal? The pizza box slipped from his hands. It hit the floor with a dull, hollow thud. Melted cheese and tomato sauce bled across the tile, an absurd domestic smell filling the room as war was quietly declared. This night wasn't over, and Mike Miller was about to learn what happens when you betray a soldier. The interview room at the precinct smelled like floor wax and exhaustion. A broken air conditioner hummed overhead, relentless and tired, like the people inside the building. The detective creased face, stained tie set, a black leather briefcase on the table. It had been pulled from Brian Hartman's SUV. Inside was a thick Trulian folder. The label stopped my breath. Target Reconstruction Project. I opened it. The first image wasn't the mall. It wasn't my house. It was a grainy hospital security. Still, dated 8 years ago, the day Abby was born. I was pale, drained, holding my newborn daughter. David stood beside me, glowing with pride, so fierce it felt like light, beneath the photo. Written in Margaret Miller's elegant fountain pen, the mistake began on this day. Needs correction. Nausea slammed into me so hard I had to grip the table. She hadn't seen a miracle. She'd seen an error. A blue-collar woman, combat boots instead of pearls. The wrong mother infecting the bloodline. I turned the page. Hundreds of photos they'd been watching us for 6 months. One showed me collapsed on the couch after a 48-hour field exercise, mud on my acus, camouflage grease still on my face. Abby sat nearby, quietly building a Lego castle. Hardman's caption was cold, clinical, cruel, subject exhibits. Extreme fatigue, inability to engage with child, environment of neglect. They took my sacrifice and called it abuse. Another photo, the McDonald's drive-through, Abby laughing. Me handing her a happy meal. We'd been celebrating straight A's, routine use of junk food to compensate for maternal absence. Every hug, every meal, every exhausted smile, documented, analyzed. Weaponized, they weren't looking for a better Mother, they were looking for a reason to erase me. At the back of the file waited the true horror. A pre-filled contract for St. Michael's Military Boarding Academy in Virginia, 800 miles away. Attached was a letter from Margaret. My granddaughter has been infected with the vulgar habits and coarseness of the lower classes. I require ironclad discipline to wash her clean. I want all traces of that woman removed from her spirit. She didn't want to raise Abby. She wanted to reprogram her. An 8-year-old shipped away like a defective product. The final page was a spreadsheet, my sergeant's pay, housing allowance, savings, beside it the Miller Trust, real estate, inheritance. Highlighted in red, subject lacks financial capacity. Recommend economic leverage to force surrender of parental rights. She thought love had a price. She thought money made her God. I closed the folder. This wasn't concern. It was a death warrant. Back home, I dropped the listening bug and the wire receipt onto the coffee table. They landed beside the cold pizza box with a dry, hollow sound, like a gavel. Mike flinched as if I'd fired a warning shot. Maisie, I can explain. I raised one hand, flat, sharp, absolute, the kind of gesture that stops gunfire. You're not explaining anything, I said quietly. You're confessing. Sit. He collapsed into the armchair, shrinking. Into himself. Why? One word. It broke him. Mom said you weren't stable. He sobbed. She said your job would get you killed, that Abby would be left with nothing. She said she was protecting her. Protecting her. I leaned closer, letting him smell the gunpowder and grit she hated so much. Hiring a predator to stalk an 8-year-old. I said softly, that's protection. I did it for David, he cried. He would have understood. That name coming from his mouth snapped something inside me. I turned away, steady, controlled, deadly calm, because monsters don't fear anger, they fear resolve. And Margaret Miller had spent 6 months documenting my failures. Now she was about to witness exactly what a so-called coarse woman does when you try to take her child. Cold marble and bitter echoes. The judge's gavel came down once flat, final, unceremonious, not victory, not relief. An ending. Margaret's attorney leaned in, whispering urgently. Already calculating angles, appeals, leverage. Margaret herself didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, lips pressed thin, as if refusing to acknowledge a reality where she did not win by default. Her pearls sat perfectly still against her throat, but I could see it now, the fracture beneath the polish. For the first time in her life, someone had said no to her money and meant it. The judge cleared his throat, based on the evidence. Presented illegal surveillance, coercion, attempted custodial manipulation, and financial inducement. This court finds no grounds for transfer of custody. Each word landed like a measured strike. Full legal and physical custody remains with the mother. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Furthermore, the judge continued, eyes hardening as he looked down at Margaret, this court is referring the matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. That was when Margaret finally turned to look at me, not with rage, with disbelief, as if the universe had betrayed her. Abby's fingers tightened around mine. I felt the warmth of her hand. Small but unshakably certain, I knelt beside her, my uniform creasing, medals clinking softly, and pressed my forehead to hers. It's over, I whispered. She nodded, solemn and brave. Can we go home now? Yes, I said, we're going home. Outside, the winter air hit my face like a cleansing slap. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. I kept walking. I had spent years being watched through lenses that were never meant to protect me. I owed no one an explanation now. Behind us, Margaret emerged, flanked by lawyers and silence. No ice cream, no gardens, no academy brochures. Just the echo of a child's voice saying, "I want my mommy," a verdict no court could overturn. That night, back in our house, the real one, not the cage. I took the listening bug and smashed it with a hammer until it was nothing but plastic shards and bent metal. Abby helped me sweep it into the trash. We ordered pizza, thick crust this time, later. When she was asleep, I returned David's photo to the mantel. I stood there a long time, fingers resting on the glass. "You were right," I murmured. "Honor still matters. The war didn't end that day." Investigations followed, lawyers circled, family ties burned down to ash. But the line had been drawn, and it was mine. Margaret Miller believed class was inherited. She believed power was purchased. She believed motherhood could be replaced. She was wrong. Because when everything was stripped away, money, manipulation, fear, what remained was a woman standing in the arena, bloodied but unbroken, and a child who chose her anyway. And that is a victory no one can ever take. Within those courthouse walls, the law carved a line that could not be argued with. 5 years, 1,000 feet. That was the distance Margaret Louise Miller was now legally required to keep between her venom and my daughter's life. I watched as the officers escorted her away. She didn't scream. She didn't resist. Women like Margaret don't unravel in public. She straightened her Chanel jacket instead, every movement stiff, rehearsed, mechanical. But as she passed me, she turned her head just enough for our eyes to meet. They weren't defeated eyes. They were the eyes of a rattlesnake with its fangs removed, quiet, focused, promising that this wasn't the end, just a pause. Behind her drifted Mike, hollow and folded inward. His head bowed so low I couldn't see his face. He looked like a man who had misplaced everything that once gave him a shape, his brother's legacy, my trust, his own dignity, all traded away for a debt that would follow him longer than prison bars ever could. The drive home was silent. Rain slid down the windshield in soft, rhythmic taps that sounded like muted sobs. When we stepped inside, the house felt different, lighter, cleaner, but also emptier, as if the walls had stepped back, leaving too much space where noise used to live. Abby went straight to her room. No laughter, no skipping feet. I grabbed a black trash bag and started in the living room. Mike's gifts were still their expensive remote control cars, plush bears with lifeless plastic eyes, Lego sets bought as bribes disguised as love. One by one, I threw them into the bag. Each dull thud was a lie hitting bottom. I needed the house clean not just of objects, but of intent, of surveillance, of manipulation, of the scent of mint and clove cigarettes that never quite belonged. I'd walked through mortar fire without shaking, but emptying a child's playroom broke me. That's when I understood it. The obstacle wasn't the threat, it was the aftermath. Freedom comes at a cost, and sometimes that cost is loneliness. That night, the house sank into a thick, velvety darkness. I was just drifting toward sleep when I felt a small weight slide under the covers. Abby pressed herself against me, trembling. Despite the warmth, "Mommy," she whispered, "are Grandma and Uncle Mike bad people?" The question pierced deeper than any weapon ever had. "They're not all bad," I said carefully, stroking her hair, "but they let bad thoughts lead them somewhere dark. Sometimes people forget how to love the right way, so we stay away from that darkness, and we choose to be our own light." She fell asleep clinging to me, breathing slow and steady. I didn't sleep at all. I poured a glass of cheap Cabernet and sat on the floor by the fireplace, staring up at David's photo. He looked so young, so certain, his future still intact inside that smile. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I had to tear your family apart to save our daughter." The tears came quietly then. I had won. On paper, in court, but victory tasted like ash. I had protected Abby. and turned myself into an island. The rain didn't stop for 7 days. Ohio has a way of turning grief into weather. Inside, the silence stopped feeling safe. It felt haunted. Like a house remembers what you remove from it. On the 8th day, the rain turned brutal. That's when I saw him. Mike stood across the street, soaked through, shoulders hunched, unmoving. No umbrella, no wave. He stayed exactly 1,000 feet away. Not an inch closer, a statue of penance, honoring the boundary with painful precision. Abby came to the window beside me. Uncle Mike is getting all wet, she whispered. He'll get sick. The armor around my heart cracked. To her, he wasn't a traitor. He was just the man who played Legos and made silly voices. Her mercy was the very thing I was fighting for, and the very thing undoing my defenses. I sent her back to her homework and walked to the mailbox instead. Inside was a soaked envelope. No money, no plea, just legal documents. Mike had surrendered control of Abby's trust fund, entirely locked himself out forever. At the bottom, a note written in bleeding ink. I'm clean now. I've cut her off. I'm working nights at a warehouse. I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm trying to become a man David wouldn't be ashamed of. Across the street, he still stood there, shivering, resentment, I realized, is poison you drink hoping someone else will die. I picked up an umbrella and walked to the edge of the driveway. I didn't cross the line, but for the first time, I didn't turn away either. I didn't cross the street. I didn't step into his space. But I made sure he could see me. Go home, Mike, I shouted, my voice cutting through the roar of rain and thunder. He looked up like he'd been struck by lightning, eyes red. Hollow, startled by the sound of his own name. For a second, hope flickered, then died. His shoulders sagged, and he started to turn away, already accepting the rejection. Go home, I called again. Steadier this time, stronger, put on dry clothes and be back here tomorrow at 5 for dinner, not 5:01. 5, he froze. Slowly, he turned back toward me, rain pouring down his face like confession. His mouth opened, disbelief written into every line of his expression. Maisie, you mean it? He asked. His voice barely holding together. You're giving me a chance. I tightened my grip on the umbrella. This isn't a second chance. I said, this is probation. His breath caught. You want to be Abby's uncle. You earn it. Every single day. You will be sober. You will work. You will tell the truth even when it costs you. You'll give me weekly proof of both. One lie, Mike. One tiny deception, and you disappear from our lives forever. Do I make myself clear? He nodded hard, swallowing a sob. Crystal, he whispered, the word breaking apart in his throat. The next evening, the doorbell rang at exactly for 55. When I opened the door, Mike stood there, like a different man. Hair neatly combed, clean flannel shirt, jeans worn thin from too many washes, no flashy bags, no glossy boxes, just a small Lego set clutched in his hands. I bought this with my first paycheck, he said softly from the warehouse. Dinner was simple, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, the kind of meal Margaret Miller would have mocked without tasting. The air was tight, fragile, like glass waiting to crack. But Abby didn't feel it. She talked non-stop about her science project, her ideas, her dreams filling the silence the way light fills broken spaces. I watched Mike listen, really. Listen. No performing, no bribing, just presence. When Abby cracked a joke, Mike laughed, not the loud, practiced laugh of a man trying to impress, but a real one, warm, unguarded. He wasn't the uncle who bought her the world anymore. He was the uncle, willing to sit on the floor and build a small plastic tower, one piece at a time. Forgiveness didn't happen that night, not even close. But a plank was laid. 6 months passed, then a year. Ohio finally stopped feeling like judgment and started feeling like home. I sold the old apartment, the one that still whispered secrets. That smelled like entitlement and control. We moved into a small house near the base, 2 bedrooms. A backyard big enough for Abby to run until her lungs burned with clean air. Our neighbors were military families, people who understood that a uniform isn't a costume and sacrifice isn't a slogan. I hung a wooden sign above the door, home. Of the free, because of the brave. Mike kept every promise. He stayed sober, took the hardest jobs, traded suits for steel-toed boots. He didn't bring gifts anymore, he brought time. Every Saturday, I watched from the kitchen window as he taught Abby how to swing a bat, cheering louder than anyone when she finally connected. Sometimes. In the way he stood protectively beside her, I saw David. Just a flicker, a ghost of who. He might have been proud to see Margaret Miller, meanwhile faded. Money couldn't save her from isolation. Her mansion became a cage, her silence, a sentence. She had everything except love. Then came the Girl Scout ceremony. Abby stood on stage, confident, radiant. When her name was called for her courage badge, she stepped forward and snapped. A crisp salute. The room exploded in applause. Mike filmed it all, tears shining in his eyes. That's when I knew we hadn't just survived, we had rebuilt. A year later, I stood on the stage at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, my promotion ceremony. The weight of my new rank settled onto my shoulders like truth finally made visible. In the front row sat Abby, and beside her, Mike. No Chanel, no lawyers, no shadows, just my unit. I spoke as a mother, as a soldier, as a woman who refused to be broken. They say you can't have it all. I told them that motherhood weakens duty. They're wrong. We fight because of our children. Love is not a distraction, it's our greatest strength. The applause shook the room as we walked out into the Ohio sunlight. Abby grabbed both our hands, swinging between us, and for the first time in a very long time, I knew it in my bones, we were finally home. I didn't move toward him. I stayed exactly where I was, planted in the rain, making sure he could see me. Go home, Mike, I shouted, my voice slicing through the storm. He looked up, startled. His eyes were red, hollowed out by nights he didn't talk about. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then his shoulders slumped, and he began to turn away, already bracing for rejection. Go home, I said again, come now, firm, change into dry clothes, be back here tomorrow at 5 for dinner. Not a minute late, he froze, slowly, he turned back toward me. His mouth fell slightly open, like someone witnessing grace they didn't believe they deserved. Maisie. Do you mean it? He whispered. You're giving me a chance. I tightened my grip on the umbrella. This is not a second chance, Mike. This is probation. You want to be Abby's uncle. You earn it. Every single day, you'll prove your sobriety, you'll prove your employment, you'll be honest about everything, one lie, one tiny deception, and you're gone from our lives forever. Do you understand me? He nodded, breaking apart. Crystal, he choked, the word swallowed by a sob. The next evening, the doorbell rang at 4:55 on the dot. When I opened the door, Mike stood there transformed, not polished. Not impressive, just real. His hair was neatly combed. He wore a faded flannel and jeans that looked like they'd survived a dozen wash cycles. No expensive bags, no grand gestures. Just a small Lego set in his hands. I bought this with my first paycheck, he said quietly. From the warehouse. Dinner was simple. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of meal Margaret Miller would have scoffed at. The air was fragile, tight with unspoken rules and second chances. Abby didn't notice. She talked about her science project, her words spilling out with pure joy, filling the silence like sunlight through cracked glass. I watched Mike listen, really listen. He didn't look small or ashamed anymore. He looked like a man finally learning how much space he was allowed to take up. When Abby told a joke, Mike laughed, a real laugh, light, unforced, something I hadn't heard from him in years. He wasn't the uncle who used to overwhelm her with gifts and promises. He was the uncle who sat on the floor and built a crooked plastic tower while listening to her dreams. Forgiveness didn't happen that night, not fully. Only a plank was laid across a dark, endless chasm, but watching them together, I knew something had taken root. Redemption needs honest ground to grow. Forgiveness isn't about erasing betrayal. It's about refusing to let it write your future. That night, we weren't healed. We were a work in progress. 6 months passed. The Ohio morning light stopped feeling like interrogation and started feeling like mercy. I sold the old apartment, the one that still whispered secrets, that smelled like control and entitlement. We packed our lives into boxes and moved into a small two-bedroom house near the base. Here, the grass is bright green. The backyard is big enough for Abby to run until her lungs burn with clean air. Our neighbors are military families, people who understand that uniforms carry weight and deployments carry silence. No more whispers, no more judgment, just nods over fences and shared understanding. The day we moved in, I hung a wooden plaque above the door, home of the free because of the brave. Mike kept his word. He stayed sober, went to every meeting, took the hardest jobs. He traded designer suits for steel-toed boots and spent his days hauling timber until his hands hardened and his back ached. Every Saturday he comes over. He doesn't bring gifts anymore. He brings time. I watch from the kitchen window as he teaches Abby how to hold a baseball bat. His voice is patient, steady. When she finally hits the ball, his cheer is louder than anyone else's on the street. Sometimes when he kneels to tie her shoes or adjust her helmet, I see a ghost. A flicker of David in the way Mike smiles, in how he stands protectively beside her. He isn't trying to replace my husband. He never could. But he's becoming the man David always believed he could be. Meanwhile, in Upper Arlington, the silence around Margaret Miller grows louder. Her mansion is full, yet empty. The scandal followed her out of the courtroom and into every social circle she once ruled. She has money, power, space for 30 at the table, and no one to share it with. Today, the community center is overflowing. It's the Girl Scouts badge ceremony. I stand in the front row in my dress uniform, my heart pounding with a joy I almost forgot was possible. Abby stands on the stage, confident, radiant. When her name is called for her badge in courage and confidence, she steps forward and delivers a sharp military salute she's practiced for weeks. The room erupts. Beside me, Mike records everything, tears shining in his eyes, finally understanding that the most valuable things in life don't come wrapped in luxury. We survived the winter. As we step into the Ohio spring, Abby grabs both our hands and swings between us. I look up at the sky, warmth on my face. Family isn't just blood. It's who stands with you when the stones start flying. We're a new unit now, and for the first time in a very long time we are home. Every night I spent balancing a rifle and a diaper bag. It was proof of a woman who refused to let the wreckage of her family decide where she would end up. I look down at the front row. There's no Chanel suit waiting for me, no pearls, no cold marble stairs, no lawyers in $1,000 shoes. Instead, I see Abby. Her eyes are wide, shining with awe and something deeper belief. Next to her is Mike. Healthier than I've ever seen him. A simple button down, no armor, just a quiet, honest pride on his face. They are my unit. They are what survived the storm. I step up to the podium. In the military, we're trained to keep our words sharp and our meaning clean. But today, I don't speak as a soldier alone. I speak as a mother. There's a myth. We all grow up hearing that a woman can't have it all, that you can't serve your country with excellence while serving your children with devotion, that the military isn't a place for mothers. They're wrong. We don't fight in spite of our children, we fight because of them. We endure the mud, the sand, and the long silences of deployment so our children can sleep in homes where the loudest sound is the wind in the trees. Motherhood isn't a distraction from duty. It's the reason for it. Love is the greatest force multiplier we have. The applause that follows isn't polite, it isn't ceremonial. It crashes through the room like thunder, shaking the floor beneath us. I catch sight of young women in uniform, near the back faces wet with tears, nodding as if something inside them has finally been named out loud. When the ceremony ends, the room empties until it's just the three of us, standing in the fading light. Abby runs up the steps and wraps her arms around my waist, pressing her face into the stiff fabric of my uniform. I lift her, feeling the solid, precious truth of her weight in my arms. I remove my service cap and set it gently on her head. It's far too big, slipping down over her eyebrows. She straightens anyway, chin tucked, back proud. "Mommy," she says, her voice carrying a strength that stops my breath. "When I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to be a soldier." I kneel so we're eye to eye and lift the cap so she can see clearly. "No, Abby," I whisper, "don't be like me. Be better than me, be stronger, be smarter, be kinder, and never let anyone tell you your worth is written in a bank ledger." I didn't leave her a mansion or a trust fund. I left her something far more permanent: her name, her spine. The knowledge that she comes from people who do not break. She nods, solemn, understanding more than her 9 years should allow. In that moment, I know the truth. I defended the only fortress that ever truly mattered. Margaret Miller tried to buy my daughter's future. I gave Abby something that could never be seized, frozen, or sold her self-respect. We leave the base as the sun sinks low, painting the Ohio sky in bruised purples and burning orange. Mike hums softly as he drives. Abby sings along to the radio from the back seat, carefree and off-key. I watch the American flag fade in the rearview mirror. The road ahead is long. There will be other battles, other doubts, other hard days. But when I catch my reflection in the window, I don't see a victim. I don't see a widow. I don't see betrayal. I see Master Sergeant Maisie Barnes. I see a mother. I see a warrior who brought her family home. Perpetual optimism isn't just a phrase, it's armor, and tonight, for the first time, it feels light. The greatest lesson I've learned wasn't taught on a battlefield. It was taught in the quiet architecture of resilience. Life will test your perimeter. Sometimes the breach comes from the people you trusted most, but your value is never defined by someone else's money or their narrow vision of your worth. True wealth lives in integrity, in boundaries, in the fierce love we give our children. Build your life on truth, because lies may sprint, but the truth always runs the marathon. Thank you for walking this long road with Abby and me. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own strength, then you already understand what real power looks like. Family isn't what you inherit, it's what you protect, and no one, no matter how rich, cruel, or loud, can break a heart built on honor.